All right, guys, so we got some updates here on Israel, Gaza, and Saudi Arabia that I want to get to in this video. So we're just going to go ahead and jump into it, starting off with the latest here from DropSite on Israel's continuous violations of this alleged ceasefire, including near daily killings of Palestinians. And now they're reporting that Israel is moving forward the yellow line, which is supposed to be the line that defines where Israeli troops are occupying inside of Gaza. The theory is, as the deal progresses, they're supposed to be moving that line backwards and occupying less of Gaza, but instead, of course, they are doing the precise opposite of that. So they start off here saying a series of Israeli attacks on Gaza City and Khan Yunis yesterday killed at least 33 Palestinians, including 12 children and 8 women, and injuring 88, according to Al Jazeera. Now let's just pause on that for a second and imagine the outrage from Western media. Imagine the outrage from American establishment politicians. If 12 Israeli children, 8 Israeli women, if 33 Israelis were killed and 88 Israelis were injured by Hamas just yesterday, do you think that they would be calling this a ceasefire that's functioning, that's working, that Hamas is abiding by? Of course they wouldn't. But this is sort of the daily dehumanization of Palestinians, where Israel can get away with this, again, on a near daily basis, and there's barely a peep from the Western media, from any major American politicians. So again, 33 killed in just the last day. They continue, they say a family of 5 was killed when a strike hit a residential building in Gaza City's Zaytun neighborhood, while other attacks in the city left more than 10 people dead, according to the Gaza civil defense chief. And additional strikes hit an UNRWA building west of Khan Yunis, a group near the Shajuya Junction on Salah al-Din Street, and the Bulbul family home in Shajuya, killing several more and injuring dozens. Israel claims, of course, that it began its attack in response to a Hamas ceasefire violation, which it claimed without evidence, which seems to be something they can just do in perpetuity, and nobody asks any questions, right? Why did you just kill 33 people, including 12 children and 8 women? Well, because Hamas did something. Do you have any proof that that happened? No, we just did it. Okay, so there you have that. They continue, they say Israel pushed westward into eastern Gaza City on Thursday, advancing tanks and moving the yellow concrete barriers that mark the ceasefire withdrawal line roughly 300 meters into Al-Tufa and Al-Shajuya after strikes a day earlier killed dozens of Palestinians, according to DropSite contributor Abdel Kader Saba. Families awoke to find themselves behind the shifted line as Israeli forces shelled the area, prompting renewed displacement, and Hamas spokesperson Hazem Qassam called it a blatant violation of the ceasefire maps and urged mediators to intervene, which seems like a pretty accurate description of what's going on here. I mean, typically, if there's a line that defines where you're supposed to be, your troops are supposed to be, and it is a withdrawal line, typically you would back up from that point, not extend it forward to the point where now you're overtaking families who had returned to whatever's left of their homes and displacing them once again. Now, last thing from this. They say Taher el-Nunu, media advisor to Hamas's political bureau, accused Israel of false and fabricated claims that the resistance violated the ceasefire, saying that there was no gunfire at Israeli forces and that Israel is using the allegation as a pretext to justify their crime after killing 28 Palestinians in new strikes. He said Israel has killed more than 300 Palestinians since the ceasefire began and is escaping the obligations of the agreement in line with Netanyahu's political agenda, urging Washington to enforce the deal it guaranteed and calling on Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey to intervene. And he also added that the resistance will not negotiate about surrendering its weapons, arguing that ending the occupation and preserving its arms are inseparable. Now, we'll get to more of this here from Ryan Grimm and Jeremy Scahill in a second, but the concept to me that Palestinians in general, not Hamas specifically or the PIJ or whatever else, but just Palestinians in general in Gaza are expected to relinquish any sort of capability to resist inside of Gaza, to resist Israeli occupation or potential future American occupation or whoever else they decide is going to be the international security force in Gaza, is completely deranged. I mean, you're talking about a people who have been occupied for decades and decades and decades at this point, and you're saying they, out of all people in the world, have no right whatsoever to resist occupation of their territory. You have to first give up all of your arms, including not just ones that could strike within Israel, which Hamas has said that they would be willing to give up, but even small arms as well. Just accept whatever fate Israel and Donald Trump personally decide for you. That's the demand that's coming from this agreement. Now, we also had this update. The United Nations Security Council approved the U.S. draft resolution on Gaza with 13 votes in favor, while China and Russia abstained. The vote installs Jared Kushner and Tony Blair's concept for a foreign board of peace as Gaza's governing authority, giving it control over the enclave's resources and borders. I mean, this is just foreign occupation of Gaza indefinitely into the future is what this is, right? At the hands of both Israel, as well as Jared Kushner and Donald Trump and Tony Blair. That's what this is. It's giving Gaza to those entities without any sort of checks on that power. Now, they continue with a quote here from the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, who basically threatened Security Council members and said, a vote against this resolution is a vote to return to the war, by which, I mean, he's essentially saying here in a translated way, he's saying, if you vote against this resolution, if you don't agree to allow Donald Trump and Jared Kushner and Tony Blair and Israel to do whatever they want with Gaza, then we're going to continue with the genocide in full force. That's what he's saying there in a threat to the rest of the Security Council. Now, to break this down a little bit further, we have Jeremy Scahill and Ryan Grimm here on what exactly this deal actually entails.
So what is in this quote unquote peace plan, and what do you think of the description of it as from the New York Times as a peace plan?
I mean, the New York Times characterization of this is so outrageously factually false that we could spend an entire show just discussing the dynamics here with how the New York Times is reporting on this, and then looking at the context of the 2+ years of genocide and how the New York Times at crucial moments has always stepped in to launder the Israeli narrative. But to zoom out and talk about what happened last night at the UN, this was an extraordinary move on the part of the UN Security Council. In fact, I was looking back and trying to find any evidence that the Security Council endorsed a plan of this nature ever in the history of the UN. And I'm pretty certain that we've never seen anything like this. Why do I say that? What essentially the UN Security Council has done is to endorse the deployment of what clearly is a Trump, not even US led, because Trump has made himself the chairman of this so-called board of peace that is going to oversee the occupation and administration of Gaza as a sort of Bantustan, for all practical purposes. And what the UN has done is authorize Trump's board to deploy a international force of foreign occupiers inside of Gaza that is not under the command and control of the United Nations, that doesn't resemble a peacekeeping force, but instead has among its primary missions the disarmament and demilitarization of the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people who have endured a genocide for more than 2 years, who have waged a 77-year battle for national liberation on principles that are firmly rooted in international law. And so what the UN has done here is to put an international stamp of legitimacy on what is a privatized plan being implemented by what I think we can call the U.S.-Israeli axis and imposing it on the Palestinian people. It does nothing to push forward any discourse around the establishment of a Palestinian state. It keeps Israel indefinitely occupying large swaths of Gaza. Right now, Israel is in control of roughly 53% of the Gaza Strip. It also links the issue of the delivery of life essentials, food, medicine, construction equipment, reconstruction equipment, entirely to the disarmament of the Palestinians. You know, everyone talks about Hamas, 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 but let's remove Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad as specifics from this equation and just look at the raw fact of what this resolution does. It endorses Israel's war of subjugation and apartheid by saying that the Palestinians stand alone in the world as the only people that do not have a right to self-determination or to resist occupation, including through the force of arms.
So, I mean, again, he's entirely correct. This is a complete sham agreement that effectively, this is the United Nations solidifying that a foreign occupying force, as directed by Donald Trump personally, who acts functionally as an extension of the state of Israel, as well as guys like, again, Jared Kushner and Tony Blair, that they are going to have full control over the self-determination of the Palestinian people. And they're demanding simultaneously, in exchange for humanitarian aid, in exchange for potential rebuilding of Gaza, that Palestinians completely give up any sort of force, any sort of resistance to this occupation, right? Keep in mind, this is the same Donald Trump who was posting AI videos of what he saw as the future of Gaza with like a massive gold Trump hotel on the beach, and he's lounging on the beach with Elon Musk, and there's money floating around and all of these things. Like, this is who is effectively being given the green light to do to Gaza whatever he wants with it, right? That's what this is. I mean, again, Palestinians seem to be the only group of people in the world for which fighting for self-determination, fighting for your fundamental rights under international law is completely unacceptable, right? And now we continue because we also had at the same time Donald Trump meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, here in the United States in the White House. And there were a lot of, let's say, interesting things that happened during this meeting. So the first one here is somebody who's a reporter who says they're from Palestine. And this is what Trump says to this reporter.
Will there be any joint investment between the U.S. and Syria? And will you visit Damascus?
Are you from Syria?
No, but
Where are you from?
I'm from Palestine.
Oh, you're making a lot of progress, huh? Very good. Well, they like me. The Palestinians like me. The Palestinians are doing very well, actually. I think we're working very closely with a lot of people to make everybody happy, including Israel, the Palestinians, and everybody.
He says, the Palestinians like me. They're doing very well. The Palestinians are doing very well. I mean, keep in mind, again, we just discussed there were dozens of them who were just murdered yesterday, right? There is no legitimate reconstruction that's happening. People are still living in rubble without any sort of adequate access to food, to clean drinking water, to shelter, to any of the basics that human beings need to survive. They continue to live under occupation, both inside of Gaza as well as in the West Bank, where there are daily pogroms that are, conducted by these terrorist Israeli settler thugs and backed up by the IDF as they continue to be ethnically cleansed from their land in the West Bank. And he says, Palestinians like me, and they're doing very well. They're doing very well, actually. Now, we have a second clip here from this same meeting, this one involving guys like Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance as well. And they were asked about the Abraham Accords, and here was the response in terms of Saudi Arabia potentially joining the Abraham Accords and how that ties in with the prospect of a future Palestinian state.
I already brought them up. What did you say? I think I got a positive response. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, so definitely we believe having a good relation with all Middle Eastern countries is a good thing, and we want to be part of the Ibrahim Accord, but we want also to be sure that we secure a clear path of two-state solution. And today we have a healthy discussion with Mr. President that we're going to work on that to be sure that we can prepare the right situation as soon as possible to have that.
I think we're, I don't want to use the word commitment, but.
Okay, so he floats out there that we'd like to join the Abraham Accords, we'd like to normalize relations with Israel, et cetera, et cetera. But there has to be a Palestinian state. Now, let's make one thing clear. The only reason he's saying this is because he does not think that he can get away with normalizing relations with Israel fully and joining the Abraham Accords without recognizing or having the pathway towards a Palestinian state. He doesn't believe he can get away with doing that without facing massive, massive regional pressure, domestic pressure. He doesn't really give a shit about Palestinian statehood in terms of Mohammed bin Salman. And he's immediately undercut by Trump in the next sentence, who says, I don't really want to talk about commitment to that. And of course, we know what the Israelis are doing on the ground to make the prospects of a Palestinian state functionally impossible at any point in the future. Now, in order to expand on that, we once again, credit to Ryan Grimm and Jeremy Scahill, have his take on this matter. So he said this: Saudi Arabia and the UAE from the very beginning really wanted Israel to crush Hamas, and he lays out why their rhetoric doesn't match their actions. He challenges the claims of regional solidarity of, oh, we're at war with the Zionist entity. Okay, you're at war. Have you done anything in that war? Are you going to do anything about the fact that they're burning children alive every day, that you have Israeli terrorists known as settlers running around burning Qurans, that they're raping prisoners? Instead, he says, what your action is on the ground is to be the death squads for the Israelis. And on the broader question of Palestinian struggle, he added, we are told to believe that these are terrorists. Part of the chains being broken right now in the world is that young and free-thinking people are recognizing the lies that they have been told. This is one of the most legitimate causes of national liberation in the history of humanity. So there was Jeremy Scahill calling out both countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE for sort of pretending like they give a shit about Palestinian statehood, like they really stand opposed to anything that Israel is doing, while functionally, in reality, they're not standing against jack shit, okay? They're, in the meantime, here in the United States, cutting, multi-million, billion-dollar deals with the U.S. As all of this is happening. I mean, here from CNBC, from $1 trillion spending to F-35s, the U.S.-Saudi pledges aren't done deals yet. So he's here in the United States as he's pretending to care about the prospects of a Palestinian state. He's here in the United States getting his hands on F-35s, pledging to spend upwards of $1 trillion in investments in the United States. This is what he actually cares about, right? So let's make that clear. Now, we also had a couple other interesting clips from this same meeting. Here was Donald Trump strangely like grabbing his hand and shaking it around and being playful for him, and said something quite interesting.
Does Trump blow them all away?
No, it's another league, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
And Trump doesn't give a fist pump. I grabbed that hand. I don't give a hell where that hand's been. I grabbed that.
Okay, so obviously he makes a sort of gesture there to Joe Biden, who infamously gave the fist bump to MBS. And he says, as he's sort of playing around with his hand, I don't care where that hand has been. That's what he's saying here. He's saying, I don't care if you have blood on your hands. Now, to be clear, he absolutely does have blood on his hands in terms of MBS. So there were questions about the 2018 murder ordered by Mohammed bin Salman of the Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And Trump said in response to a journalist questioning on this, things happen. Let's go ahead and watch this clip here.
He's done a phenomenal job. You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. But he knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
It's just you ask, Mr. President.
So we'll get to his response here, but keep in mind, again, we're talking about a Saudi dissident journalist, somebody who worked for the Washington Post, an American outlet. And the president of the United States is asked about this, and he's insulted that the journalist would, quote unquote, embarrass his guest by asking about the murder of a Washington Post journalist, ordered by him, by the way, counter to what Donald Trump is saying that, oh, well, he knew nothing about it, as he then slanders Jamal Khashoggi and says, well, he was hated by a lot of people. He was a very controversial guy. Guys, I mean, keep in mind what we're talking about. This man sitting right here, who Trump said knew nothing about it, he ordered the killing, the murder, the dismemberment of a Washington Post journalist while he was in the Saudi consulate in Turkey. That's what this guy did. And Trump is saying, shit happens. Why would you ask that question? How dare you ask that question? I mean, this is absolutely wild shit. Now, we get to MBS's response to this, which is similarly insane.
It's really painful to hear, anyone that been losing his life for, no real purpose or nothing illegal way. And it's been painful for us in Saudi Arabia. We've did all the right steps of investigation, etc. in Saudi Arabia, and we've improved our system to be sure that nothing happened like that. And it's painful and it's a huge mistake, and we are doing.
It's a big mistake. Oops. I accidentally ordered the murder and dismemberment of one of my political adversaries. Oops. Sorry about it. I mean, he doesn't even in this clip say sorry about it. He just said, it was a mistake. I don't know how that happened, but we're going to work to make sure it doesn't happen again. Like, you are responsible for this. He's acting as if this is something that happened. Oh, it was a tragic thing that this guy lost his life. No, he was murdered and dismembered because of you directly. Like there's no qualms about this. This isn't in question. He's directly responsible for that murder. And they're just both brushing this aside as if this isn't a big deal, right? And keep in mind, we have previous testimonies from Trump in the past of him saying, yeah, I saved MBS from any sort of accountability on the murder of a Washington Post journalist. Absolutely unhinged shit. Now, we also have this clip here of Trump complimenting the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia on his human rights record.
I'm very proud of the job he's done. What he's done is incredible in terms of human rights and everything else. And he's the Crown Prince, the future king. And I just want to pay my greatest respect to your father, King.
He says what he's done is incredible in terms of human rights. A guy who chops up journalists, a guy who his country is responsible for using modern day slavery at a mass scale. This is the guy, a guy rewind a couple years to the, genocidal assault in Yemen. This is who he's talking about. And he says, yeah, he's a great guy. In fact, specifically what he's done on human rights is fantastic. I mean, you can't make this shit up. You cannot make this shit up. So, make no mistake about it. This is what the United States of America, this is what our government thinks human rights are, right? Cozying up to dictators who chop up journalists and use modern day slavery, not to mention draconian laws inside of Saudi Arabia as well. We cozy up to Israel. We supply both of these countries with weapons to blow up innocent children, right? These are the countries that we want to align ourselves with in terms of values, right? To give you a perspective in terms of who some of our friends are on the international stage. So again, just a reminder, let's not buy into any sort of propaganda when it comes to the US saying, oh, well, we have to topple this government or this country because we care so deeply about international law and human rights and freedom and democracy. Just remind yourselves of our allyships like these, like with Mohammed bin Salman and with the Pakistan government and with the government of Israel, etc. Many dictatorships around the world, incredibly brutal ones at that the United States is very best friends with. Now, final thing that I'll mention in this video, this is equally as insane somehow, maybe even more so than everything we've talked about previously in this video. So Jonathan Pollard, okay, was a spy for Israel against the United States who leaked hundreds of thousands of documents to Israel. We're talking about the top of the top, most extremely classified information, hundreds of thousands of documents that he stole from the United States to give to Israel. And he was found guilty. He was convicted of this and sentenced to decades and decades in prison. He served 30 years in prison, and then he was subsequently released under the Obama administration. That was a part of the agreement. Upon his release, he then went back to Israel and was greeted with a very warm welcome by none other than Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who celebrated him on his return. And now we have this. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, welcomed convicted U.S. spy for Israel, Jonathan Pollard, into the U.S. embassy back in July. I don't know how to contextualize this other than as like a borderline traitorous behavior, a traitorous action that we're seeing here from Mike Huckabee, right? And keep in mind, we know who Mike Huckabee is. This is like one of these full-blown Christian evangelical, like death cult end times believers who thinks that Israel needs to complete the Greater Israel Project. We need to get the heifers over to Israel so that we can bring about the second coming of Jesus and the world is going to end in hellfire. Like, this is the kind of shit that Mike Huckabee believes in. So it's not necessarily shocking that he would do this thing, but it should be shocking. You have a U.S. ambassador welcoming into the U.S. embassy a convicted spy, somebody who stole information, highly classified shit, by the hundreds of thousands and gave it over to Israel. He was convicted for this. And here you have Mike Huckabee meeting with him. I mean, just to contextualize this a little bit more, here from Ryan, he says Netanyahu demanded that Bill Clinton released convicted Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard after telling Clinton that Israel knew of the tapes between him and Lewinsky, Monica Lewinsky. According to multiple reports, Clinton did not do it after George Tenet threatened to resign as CIA chief if he did so, and then Obama released him in 2015, and now he's meeting with Huckabee. And again, the Obama released him thing, that wasn't like Obama went out of his way to release him. That was just a part of the scheduling of his sentencing. But I mean, even Bill Clinton did not release this guy when Netanyahu was demanding it. Okay, and they were blackmailing him. They were blackmailing the former president of the United States, saying, we know about your little affair in the Oval Office with Monica Lewinsky, right? You know, it would suck if that got out to the public. Maybe you should release this guy. And even then, Bill Clinton did not do it. And now we've progressed to the point where years later, you have a U.S. ambassador welcoming this guy into the U.S. embassy. A little bit more on him. Here from the Jerusalem Post, ex-spy Jonathan Pollard wants to enter the Knesset. He wants to enter the Israeli government. And he also wants to send Gazan Arabs to Ireland. He wants to send the Palestinian population in Gaza to Ireland to ethnically cleanse them and ship them off to another country. This is a guy who Mike Huckabee was just meeting with. So I'll leave you guys off with that. Absolutely insane shit is happening at the highest levels of the U.S. government. We have continued genocide happening in Gaza, albeit at a much, slower pace than it was before, but continued massacres, continued escalating violence, and expansion of settlements in the West Bank as well. At the same time, we have Mohammed bin Salman, this brutal Saudi dictator, meeting with Donald Trump, cutting, deals for F-35s, downplaying the murder and dismemberment of the journalist that he had killed, talking about the prospect of a Palestinian statehood when we really know that he doesn't give two shits about that. And we also have U.S. ambassadors meeting with former Israeli spies who stole information from the United States of America. So this is our government for you, right? This is our government. So I'll keep you guys updated. That's all I got for today. Remember to like, comment, subscribe if you appreciate this kind of content. And yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying